The icy water was a promise, a cold, dark promise to end the pain. Malene Taylor waded deeper into the Yellowstone River, the December chill biting at her skin through her thin nightgown. Her hands cradled the swell of her belly, the life she was about to extinguish along with her own. 3 months a widow, 5 months with child, and utterly alone. The whispers in town followed her like a shadow. Scandalous, shameless. The words were colder than the river itself. Just a few more steps, she breathed, the words turning to frost in the air. The water clawed at her waist, a paralyzing cold that stole her breath. This was it. This was the end. Her wedding ring, a small glint of gold in the oppressive moonlight, slipped beneath the black water. A memory flashed. Thomas, his warm hands, his promise of forever. Now he was just a name on a wooden cross, the victim of a robbery gone wrong. And she was about to join him. The current was strong, pulling at her, welcoming her. The baby inside her gave a sudden, sharp kick, a tiny protest against the inevitable. But what life could she give it? A life of shame? A life of hunger? No, this was mercy. She squeezed her eyes shut, ready for the final step, ready for the darkness to take her. And that's when the arms wrapped around her. Strong, unyielding arms that ripped her from her purpose. "What in God's name are you doing, woman?" A voice growled, low and rough against her ear. He was dragging her backward, his boots finding purchase on the slick riverbed, while hers found none. She fought him, her nails scraping against his thick coat, her screams swallowed by the vast, empty landscape. "Let me go! Let me go!" He didn't listen. He just kept pulling, his grip like iron. "Not a chance," he grunted, hauling her onto the frozen bank. "I didn't ride through a blizzard just to watch someone throw their life away." The moment her feet hit solid ground, her legs gave out. She collapsed in a heap, shivering uncontrollably, the soaked fabric of her nightgown clinging to her like a second skin. Through a curtain of wet, tangled hair, she looked up at the man who had ruined everything. He was a mountain, tall and broad, his face hidden in the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. He shrugged off his heavy duster coat and wrapped it around her, the sudden warmth a shock to her system. "Name's Cole Zachary," he said, his voice as rough as his appearance. He crouched down, bringing his face level with hers. His jaw was set like granite, and his eyes were dark and intense, burning with a fire that seemed to defy the cold. "And you," he said, "have got some explaining to do." She turned her head away, staring into the bleak landscape. "You had no right." He let out a long breath, a plume of white in the frigid air. "Maybe not, but that little one you're carrying has a right to live, wouldn't you say?" The baby kicked again, a tiny, insistent thump against her ribs. It was as if the child was agreeing with the stranger. A fresh wave of tears burned her eyes. She had no answer for him. Cole stood up, surveying the area. "Where do you live? I need to get you warm before my efforts here become pointless." "The white cottage," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Beyond the ridge." He didn't say another word. He just scooped her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. She was too exhausted, too cold, too defeated to fight. He carried her to a massive chestnut horse that stood waiting, unbothered by the snow. "Hold on tight," he ordered, swinging into the saddle before pulling her up to sit across his lap, cocooning her in the heavy coat. The ride was short, a blur of motion and the steady rhythm of the horse's gait. He kicked open the door to her small cottage, the interior as cold and lifeless as her heart. The fire had died hours ago, right after she'd made her final decision. He set her down gently on a chair by the hearth and immediately went to work, his movements quick and sure. Within minutes, a small flame flickered to life, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Get out of those wet clothes," he commanded without looking at her. I'll step outside. She did as she was told, moving like an automaton. She peeled off the sodden layers, dried her numb skin, and pulled on a clean nightdress and her thickest shawl. "You can come in," she called out, her voice barely a whisper. Cole returned with an armful of firewood, which he added to the now growing blaze. The warmth was slowly starting to seep into her bones. "You have any coffee?" he asked. She pointed to a tin on the shelf. "There's not much left." He moved around her tiny kitchen with an unexpected grace for such a large man, and soon the rich aroma of coffee filled the small space. It was the first comforting thing she had smelled in months. She watched him, this stranger. He was younger than she first thought, maybe 30. His face was weathered, carved by wind and sun, but it was a handsome face in a rugged, dangerous sort of way. A thin white scar ran along his jawline, a silent testament to a violent past. "Why were you out there tonight?" she finally asked, her voice cracking. He handed her a steaming mug. "Tracking a bounty," he said simply, his own cup cradled in his large, calloused hands. "Lost his trail in the storm, was making camp when I heard splashing." He took a sip, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "Your turn. Why would a woman in your condition be taking a midnight swim in a frozen river?" She looked down into her cup. "My husband is dead. 3 months now. Bandits." Her hand went to her belly, a protective, unconscious gesture. "I have no family, no money. And the good people of this town, they whisper. They say the baby can't be his, that we were only married 4 months when he died. And were you unfaithful?" The question was blunt, brutal. Her head snapped up, a spark of her old fire flashing in her eyes. "No, the baby is his. Thomas and I, we were together before the wedding." Cole just nodded, his expression unreadable. "So you decided to kill yourself and your innocent child to escape gossip." "It's more than gossip," she snapped, the words tumbling out in a rush of despair. "It's being an outcast. It's no one offering me work. It's watching the food run out, knowing my baby will be born only to starve." Death seemed kinder. He was silent for a long time, just staring into the flames. The fire crackled, the only sound in the tense cottage. "I'll stay the night," he said finally, his voice low. "Make sure you don't get any more foolish ideas. We'll figure something out in the morning." She wanted to tell him to leave, to tell him she didn't need a guardian. But the fight had gone out of her. She just nodded and retreated to her bed, pulling the thin blankets up to her chin. She lay there for hours, listening to the sound of his steady breathing from his spot on the floor by the hearth. A bounty hunter, a dangerous man, no doubt. But he had saved her. Why? The question echoed in her mind until the first pale light of dawn crept through the window. When she emerged from her room, he was already up, stoking the fire. He'd made more coffee and had warmed some of her remaining cornbread. "Hope you don't mind," he said, gesturing to the meager breakfast. "Thought you could use it." She sat down, a sudden, sharp hunger pang reminding her she hadn't eaten in over a day. "Thank you." He watched her eat for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking," he started. "I'm heading to Billings after I collect this bounty. It's a bigger town. Nobody knows you there. You could start over." "Mr. Zachary," she began, "I appreciate your concern, but I can't possibly—" "Cole," he cut her off. "Call me Cole. And yes, you can. I'll help you get there." The offer was so unexpected, so absurd, that she just stared at him. "Why? Why would you do that? You don't know me." He shrugged his massive shoulders, his gaze drifting back to the fire. "Maybe I know what it's like to want to end it all. Maybe I know what it's like to be saved when you don't think you deserve it." There was something in his voice, a raw, painful edge that made her lean forward. "What happened to you?" His jaw tightened. The scar seemed more prominent in the firelight. "The war," he said, the words clipped. "Shiloh. Watched my whole company get cut to pieces. Came back. Different. The nightmares wouldn't stop." He absently rubbed his shoulder. "Found myself staring down the barrel of my own service revolver one night. An old friend found me. Talked me down. Told me I owed it to the dead to live the life they couldn't." A wave of understanding, of empathy, washed over her. He wasn't just some rough bounty hunter. He was a man haunted by his own ghosts. "And did you?" she asked softly. "Did you live that life?" A corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Still trying," he said, his eyes meeting hers across the small table. "Reckon saving you and that little one might just be part of it." But she would soon learn that being saved by Cole Zachary was just the beginning of her problems, and that the real danger wasn't in the past, but waiting just over the horizon. The next few days were a strange dream. Cole made himself at home in her small cottage, but not in a way that felt intrusive. It felt protective. He chopped enough firewood to last 2 winters, his axe falling with a steady, rhythmic thud that became a comforting sound. He patched the leak in the roof that had been dripping for weeks. He even rode into town and used his own money to buy her flour, coffee, and salted meat, ignoring the curious stares of the townsfolk. They treated him with a wide berth, a cautious respect reserved for men who looked like they knew how to handle themselves. He was a shield, and for the first time in months, Meline felt a sliver of safety. On the third night, as they sat in comfortable silence before the fire, the baby began to move, a sudden violent series of kicks and tumbles. "Oh!" she gasped, her hands flying to her stomach. Cole was on his feet in an instant. "What is it? Is it time?" She shook her head, a small smile touching her lips for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "No, just restless. A real fighter, this one." Without thinking, she reached out, grabbing his large, calloused hand and pressing it against her swollen belly. His eyes widened as the baby delivered a powerful kick directly into his palm. A look of pure, unadulterated wonder transformed his rugged features, softening the hard lines around his eyes and mouth. That's really something," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Just like his father," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "Thomas was stubborn as a mule." "Tell me about him," Cole said, his hand still resting gently on her stomach. "He was kind," she said, a sad smile on her face. "He worked as a mail carrier. He loved bringing people news from their families, said watching their faces light up was worth all the long, cold miles." "Sounds like a good man." "He was," she said, blinking back tears. "We had so many plans. This cottage was just a start. He wanted a real ranch with a dozen horses for our children to ride." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said her name, Meline. The way it sounded in his low voice sent a strange warmth spreading through her chest. "Those dreams don't have to die with him." Her heart gave a painful lurch. She pulled his hand away and looked into the fire, suddenly flustered and confused. Thomas was her husband. He'd been gone only 3 months. How could she feel this flutter for another man? "I should get some rest," she said abruptly, standing up. Cole's expression was unreadable. "I'll be heading out tomorrow," he said. "Need to pick up that Bounty's trail again. Should only be a few days." A knot of panic tightened in her stomach. The thought of him leaving, of being alone again, was terrifying. "Of course," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've been alone for months. I'll be fine." The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. The next morning she stood in the doorway as he saddled his horse. "Promise me," he said, his dark eyes serious. "You won't go near that river." "I promise." And she meant it. The river no longer seemed like a solution. Cole swung himself into the saddle, but paused, looking down at her. When I get back, we'll make a plan. For Billings. Spring is coming. It's a good time for a fresh start. He was offering her a future, a real one. But could she take it? Could she leave the last place she'd shared with Thomas? Could she put her life and her child's life in the hands of this near stranger? As if reading her mind, he said, I'm not asking for anything in return, Meline. Just offering a hand. He tipped his hat, turned his horse, and rode away, a solitary figure against the vast white landscape. She watched until he was just a speck on the horizon. The silence he left behind was deafening. The days crawled by. A week passed, then two. Meline told herself not to worry. Bounty hunting was dangerous, unpredictable, but every night she found herself at the window, searching the horizon for a sign of him. The firewood he'd chopped dwindled. The food he'd bought ran low. The hope he'd given her began to curdle into fear. It was nearly 3 weeks after he'd left when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Her heart lapped into her throat. Cole. She ran to the door and threw it open, a relieved smile already on her face. But the smile died on her lips. It wasn't Cole. 3 men sat on their horses in her yard, their faces hard and unfamiliar. The leader, a thin man with a pockmarked face and cruel, narrow eyes, dismounted. Mrs. Taylor, he said, his voice oily, name's Jasper Willis. We're associates of your late husband. Maline's hand flew to her belly. Thomas had never mentioned a Jasper Willis. What do you want? Willis's lips curled into a grin that didn't reach his eyes, revealing a row of tobacco-stained teeth. Thomas was carrying something for us, something valuable. He had an accident before he could deliver it. We've just come to collect our property. Every instinct screamed danger. I don't know what you're talking about. My husband was a mail carrier. The grin vanished. Don't play dumb with me, lady. Thomas Taylor was skimming from our shipments for months. The last package was worth $5,000. Now, where did he hide it? The world tilted on its axis. $5,000. Skimming. This wasn't possible. Thomas was the most honest man she'd ever known. You're mistaken, she said, her voice shaking. My husband was not a thief. Willis jerked his head at his 2 companions. Search the place. Tear it apart. Meline tried to block the door, but one of the men shoved her aside so hard she stumbled, catching herself on the table. They stormed into her home, flipping the mattress, smashing her few meager possessions, tearing everything apart. Please, she sobbed, I'm telling you, I don't know anything about any money. Willis grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh like talons. Your husband stole from very dangerous men, Mrs. Taylor. Men who don't like being cheated. Now you can tell us where the money is, or we can make this very, very unpleasant for you. And that bastard you're carrying. A cold, paralyzing terror seized her. They weren't going to believe her. They were going to hurt her. They were going to hurt her baby. And then a sound cracked through the air. A gunshot. The window just inches from Willis's head exploded into 1,000 tiny pieces. Let her go. The voice was unmistakable. It was Cole. He was standing in the yard, his rifle leveled, his face a mask of cold fury. Willis cursed, shoving Meline in front of him like a shield. This ain't your business, bounty hunter. I'm making it my business. Cole's voice was flat, deadly. Now step away from her. The other 2 thugs emerged from the cottage, their hands hovering over their pistols. It's 3 against 1, Zachary, one of them sneered. Bad odds. I've faced worse, Cole said calmly, his rifle never wavering from Willis's chest. And I only need 1 bullet for your boss here. The rest of you can decide if he's worth dying for. The air crackled with tension. Meline could feel Willis trembling behind her, his bravado melting away. We just want what's ours, he hissed, his voice strained. Taylor stole from us. I don't care what you think he did, Cole shot back. You're not touching her. I'm going to count to 3. If you're not on your horses and riding away, I start shooting. 1. Willis's grip tightened for a second. 2. His men exchanged a nervous glance. This wasn't what they signed up for. All right, all right. Willis shoved Meline forward so hard she nearly fell and threw his hands up. We're going. But this ain't over, Zachary. That money belongs to people you don't want to cross. Neither do you, Cole warned, his voice like ice. Ride out. And don't ever come back. She's under my protection now. The men scrambled onto their horses and galloped away, disappearing over the ridge. The second they were gone, Cole was at her side, his hands gently checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? She shook her head, the delayed shock hitting her in a wave of violent tremors. No. But Cole, they said Thomas, they said he was a thief. It can't be true, can it? He guided her into the wreckage of her home, his face grim. I don't know, Meline, he said softly, but I'm damn well going to find out. He looked around at the destruction. Pack what's left. You can't stay here. They'll be back. Where will I go? She asked, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the ruins of her life. I know a place, he said. An old trapper who owes me a favor. It's hidden deep in the mountains. You'll be safe there. As she stuffed her few remaining belongings into a sack, a horrible thought took root in her mind. Thomas, her kind, gentle husband, a thief, working with men like that? It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense anymore. The only thing that felt real, the only thing she could hold on to, was the steady presence of the bounty hunter who had, for the second time, pulled her back from the brink. But as they rode away from the shattered cottage, Meline realized the truth might be far more dangerous than the lie. Cole was hiding something, and whatever it was going to change everything. The cabin was nestled so deep in the pines you'd never find it if you weren't looking. It belonged to an old trapper named Ezekiel, a man with a beard like spun snow and eyes that held the quiet wisdom of the mountains. Any friend of Cole's is welcome here, he'd said, his voice a gravelly whisper, as he showed her to a small clean room, especially one carrying precious cargo. For the first time in weeks, Meline slept through the night. But the peace was fragile, a thin sheet of ice over a dark, churning river of questions. That night, after Ezekiel had turned in, she and Cole sat by the fire. The flames cast long, dancing shadows, and in their flickering light she finally asked the question that had been haunting her. Cole, who are those men? Really? What did Thomas get involved in? Cole stared into the fire, his coffee cup held loosely in his hands. He took a long, slow sip before he answered. Their boss is a man named Victor Donovan, he said, his voice low. He runs a smuggling ring, stolen goods, illegal liquor, anything that'll turn a profit. He's got his hands in everything from here to the Canadian border. Her blood ran cold. No, Thomas wouldn't. He was an honest man. People can surprise you, Meline, he said gently, even the ones we think we know. Not Thomas, she insisted, her voice rising. There has to be another reason. He wouldn't have risked our future for money. He just wouldn't. Cole looked at her then, a long, searching look. You really loved him, didn't you? He was my husband, she said automatically, her hand drifting to her belly. The father of my child. That's not what I asked, he said, his voice quiet but firm. She looked away, staring into the flames. The truth was complicated, a tangled mess of gratitude and affection. Yes, she finally whispered. I loved him. He was good to me when no one else was. There's a difference between loving someone and being grateful to them, Cole observed, his insight sharp as a knife. When she didn't answer, he added, I'm not judging. I just need to understand. She took a shaky breath. My father died when I was 16. We had nothing. My mother and we took in laundry, mending, anything to survive. Then she got sick. Thomas was the mail carrier. He paid the doctor's bills. He brought us food. After she passed, he asked me to marry him. He said a woman shouldn't be alone in this world. Tears welled in her eyes. He saved me, Cole, from a life of poverty and loneliness, just like you saved me from that river. Cole reached across the small space between them and took her hand. His touch was firm, warm, and shockingly comforting. I think I understand, he said, and I promise you, Meline, we will find the truth, whatever it is. The next week was a strange mix of peace and anxiety. She spent her days with Ezekiel, learning to bake bread and mend worn clothes, her body growing heavier, the baby more active. But every time she heard the wind whistle through the pines, she jumped, thinking it was Willis and his men. Cole would disappear for a day or two at a time, riding out at dawn and returning after dark. He never said where he was going, but she could see the toll it was taking on him. The lines around his eyes deepened. He grew quieter, more distant. He was hunting for answers, and whatever he was finding, it was dragging him into a darkness she couldn't see. One evening he returned later than usual. She had waited up, a knot of worry tightening in her chest with every passing hour. When he finally walked through the door, covered in dust and looking utterly exhausted, she knew. He had found something. You should be in bed, he said, his voice rough with fatigue. I couldn't sleep. Cole, please, tell me what you've found out. The not knowing is worse. He dropped his hat onto the table and sank into a chair, running a hand over his face. I found one of the men who used to ride with your husband, he began, his voice heavy. Another mail carrier. She held her breath, bracing for the worst. Thomas wasn't stealing from Donovan. A wave of dizzying relief washed over her. I knew it. I knew he wasn't a thief. But Cole's face was still a grim mask. The relief died in her throat. There was more. He was working against them, Cole said, his eyes locking with hers. He was an informant. For the U.S. Marshals, he was helping them build a case to take down Donovan's entire operation. The room seemed to spin. Thomas, her quiet, gentle Thomas, working as a secret informant against a dangerous smuggling ring. It was impossible. It was unbelievable. The money, Cole continued, his voice low and intense. The $5,000 Willis is looking for. It wasn't stolen. It was evidence. Marked bills that Thomas had collected to prove the link between Donovan and the robberies. Then why do they think I have it? She whispered, her mind struggling to keep up. Because it vanished after the attack on the stagecoach, he explained. Donovan thinks Thomas hid it somewhere before he died. The marshals think one of Donovan's men took it from his body. Both sides are tearing the territory apart, looking for it. The full, terrifying reality of her situation crashed down on her. And they both think I know where it is, she breathed, the words tasting like poison. Which means, Cole finished grimly, that neither one of us is safe until that money is found. She pushed herself to her feet, pacing the small cabin. But I don't know anything. Thomas never said a word about marshals or evidence or any of this. He was protecting you, Cole said softly. The less you knew, the safer he thought you'd be. A memory suddenly broke through the fog of her confusion. A memory so vivid it made her gasp, the night before Thomas left on his final trip. He'd been acting strangely, his eyes full of a worry she hadn't understood. He'd pulled her into their bedroom and pried up one of the floorboards. If anything ever happens to me, Meline, he'd said, his voice serious, there's something hidden here, something you might need. At the time, she'd thought he was being overly dramatic. Now his words echoed in her mind with terrifying clarity. She turned to Cole, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrifying realization. "Cole," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I think I know where the money is." The world had just shrunk to the size of a single hidden floorboard in a ransacked cottage, and getting to it would mean walking straight back into the lion's den. 2 days later, under the cloak of a moonless night, they rode back to her cottage. The silence of the journey was heavy, each crack of a twig under the horse's hooves sounding like a gunshot. The cottage was just as they'd left it, a ghostly skeleton in the darkness. But as they crept closer, Cole held up a hand, signaling for her to stop. "They've been back," he whispered, his hand resting on the butt of his revolver. "More than once." The inside of the house was even worse than before. The walls had been torn apart in places, the floorboards pried up at random. Whoever had been here was desperate, and they were getting more destructive with each visit. Maline's heart hammered against her ribs as she led him into the small bedroom. She pointed to a spot near the wall, a section of flooring that, miraculously, remained untouched. "There. He showed me right there." Cole knelt, pulling a long knife from his boot. He worked quickly and quietly, carefully prying up the board. Meline held the lantern, her hand shaking so badly the light danced across the walls. The board came loose with a soft groan. Cole reached into the dark cavity beneath and pulled out a heavy oilskin-wrapped package. His fingers worked at the ties, unwrapping it on the dusty floor. Inside were thick stacks of bills and a single folded piece of paper. "This is it," Cole breathed, quickly fanning through the money. 5,000 exactly. Meline ignored the money. Her eyes were fixed on the letter. With trembling hands, she picked it up and unfolded it. It was Thomas's handwriting, neat and familiar. "My dearest Meline," it began, "if you are reading this, then the worst has happened. I am so sorry for the secrets I've kept. The money in this package is not ours. It is evidence against Victor Donovan. You must take it to one man, and one man only. U.S. Marshal James Harker in Helena. Trust no one else. He will know what to do. He will protect you. Everything I did to build a safer world for you and our child. I love you. Always. Thomas." Tears blurred the words. He hadn't been a thief. He'd been a hero. A quiet, unassuming hero who had given his life trying to make the world better. "He was trying to do the right thing," she whispered, clutching the letter to her chest. Cole placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "He was a brave man, Meline." Suddenly, a floorboard creaked on the porch outside. Cole moved faster than she could blink. He smothered the lantern with his hat, plunging the room into absolute darkness. He drew his revolver, the soft click of the hammer being pulled back, echoing in the terrifying silence. "Someone's coming," he hissed. "Get behind me. Don't make a sound." They stood frozen in the dark, listening. The footsteps were slow, cautious. The front door groaned open. A beam of light from a lantern cut through the gloom, sweeping across the ransacked living room. "Mrs. Taylor," a deep voice called out. "My name is James Harker. I'm a U.S. Marshal. I'm looking for the widow of Thomas Taylor." Maline's heart stopped. Harker. The name from the letter. But what if it was a trap? What if this was one of Donovan's men using the Marshal's name? "Show me your badge," Cole called out from the darkness, his voice hard as iron, his gun aimed squarely at the doorway. "Slide it across the floor where I can see it." A moment of silence, then the metallic scrape of something sliding across the wooden planks. Keeping his gun trained on the doorway, Cole scooped up the object. Even in the dim light, she could see the silver star. "Looks real," he murmured. "I've been looking for Mrs. Taylor for weeks," Harker's voice came again from the doorway. "Her husband was a key witness. He collected the final piece of evidence we need to bring Donovan down." "How do we know you're not one of Donovan's men?" Cole challenged. "Because for the last month, Donovan's men have been ripping this territory apart, looking for the same thing I am, the marshal replied. And I'm trying to find her before they do. That was enough for Cole. He lowered his gun slightly. Come in slow, hands where I can see them. The marshal stepped inside, a man in his 50s with a weathered face and weary eyes. His gaze fell on Meline, on the unmistakable swell of her belly, and his expression softened. Ma'am, I had no idea. Your husband never mentioned— There was a lot my husband didn't mention, Meline said, her voice surprisingly steady. She stepped forward, holding out the oilskin package. But he did leave this for you. Harker took the package, his eyes widening as he saw the contents. This is it, he breathed, a look of profound relief on his face. This is everything. With this, we can get warrants for Donovan and his entire crew. Your husband, Mrs. Taylor, he just saved this territory. What happens now? Cole asked, never fully letting his guard down. Now, the marshal said, his voice full of grim determination, I take this to Helena, and you two need to disappear. Once word gets out this money has been found, Donovan will stop at nothing to find who had it. Meline looked at Cole. In the span of a few weeks, this stranger had become her anchor, her protector, her entire world. He had pulled her from the darkness in more ways than one. Helena is a good start, Cole said, his eyes meeting hers. And then maybe Billings, like we talked about. A fresh start, she asked softly, the question hanging in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Together? Cole's rugged face softened. He stepped closer to her. If you'll have me, Meline, I know it's soon. I could never replace Thomas. But I think we could build something good. You, me, and the little one. The marshal cleared his throat awkwardly. I'll, just wait outside. When they were alone, Cole took both of her hands in his. That night by the river, he said, his voice low and earnest. I was tracking a bounty, that's true, but something else led me there. Fate, luck, I don't know what to call it. But finding you, it changed everything for me. For me, too, she whispered. You gave me hope when I had none left. Is that hope big enough for a future? He asked, his vulnerability laid bare. With me? I'm not a simple man, Meline, but I swear I will spend the rest of my life protecting you both. She reached up and gently touched the scar on his jaw. I think, she said, her voice thick with emotion, I think Thomas would want me to be happy. He would want his child to be safe and loved. A tear traced a path down her cheek. And I think you're the man to do that, Cole Zachary. His arms went around her, pulling her into a gentle but firm embrace. That's a promise I'll die to keep, he murmured against her hair. And there in the ruins of her old life, surrounded by the ghosts of the past, Meline felt the undeniable spark of a new beginning. 6 months later, the Montana sun was warm on Meline's face. She sat in a rocking chair on the porch of a small, sturdy house on the outskirts of Billings. In her arms, sleeping peacefully, was her son, Thomas Taylor, Jr. He had his father's dark eyes, but the determined set of his jaw was all Cole. In the yard, Cole was finishing a new corral, the steady thud of his hammer a comforting rhythm to their new life. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow, and his eyes found hers. A wide, easy smile spread across his face, a smile she saw more and more these days. He set down his tools and walked over, leaning down to press a kiss to her forehead and gently stroke the baby's soft cheek. "How are my two favorite people?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Thinking it's about time their papa took a break," she teased. He settled onto the porch step at her feet, taking her free hand in his. "This life," he said, looking out at the ranch they were building from nothing. "It's more than I ever deserved, more than I ever let myself dream of." "It wasn't a dream," she said softly. "It was a promise. The one you made to me in a dark cottage, and the one I made to myself to live. Endings are just new beginnings in disguise." Cole looked up at her, his eyes full of a love so deep and steady it took her breath away. "From the darkest water," he said, "to the brightest future." The baby stirred, and as Meline looked down at her son, and then at the man who had become his father in every way that mattered, she knew her journey was complete. The river hadn't been an end, it had been a crossroads, and it had led her here, to a life of love and renewal she never thought possible, a life pulled from the darkness and brought into the brilliant, dazzling light. If you enjoyed this story, there are countless others waiting in the shadows. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss a single one.